If you've ever wanted your own sling, well, today I'm going to show you how to make your own. I've seen them in different shops for $460 to $500. I made this with the components for about $300. People from all walks of life enjoy having a sling. Well, there are benefits. You don't get carpet burn on the knees, you don't do your back in, and of course it's very handy because your hands are free for whatever you do. Of course, to make a sling you need some good quality leather. I use a 3.5mm double butt. This is a nice Italian leather. It's what they make sort of heavy duty jean belts out of, and you need about 1.5 square metres. I go to a shop in Melbourne called Leffler's, and they have just about everything you could possibly need to make slings or any other leather gear. Leffler's, they've got a website, as you can see, and I'm sure there are shops similar to this right around the world. So go looking. Do a bit of Googling. Now, I don't actually have a workshop. I used to, but I don't at the moment. So I used a friend's backyard and I set up a sort of rough trestle table. I didn't have a lot of tools, but you need sort of a hammer and maybe a file, a chisel, a couple of screwdrivers, some clamps, a couple of rulers. Now, it's a good idea to have something so you get your corners right. I've got this nice little metal thing, but you can even use a piece of cardboard if you want your corners. You also need a good straight edge, and I had an old piece of straight aluminium and a Stanley knife or whatever sort of knife to cut the edges. I normally make up a cutting list. I do all my my measurements, make up a cutting list, and mark them off as I go along. The sling base is 41 by 21.5. I reinforce it on the sides and top and bottom. This isn't entirely necessary, but I think it looks good. And of course, once you put the rivets in, it also makes them look fairly smart. For the corners, top and bottom, I have some angle straps, and I reinforce these with a little bit of panel. I don't know whether this is necessary, but I tend to think it makes them a little bit stronger and a bit more robust. And give something for the rivets to go through. The base bits tend to be about 4 inches and the side bits are about 2.5 inches wide. And I have a cutting list, so as I cut things off, I sort of tick them off the list. Also, once you've cut it, you can actually put an edge on each of the metal strips. There's tools you can get from Leffler's and other places that do this. Some of the corners I actually sort of cut a round corner on them, and I use a chisel that I found in a little hardware store. The reinforcing panels I put under the base of the sling. I miter these together just so it looks a little bit neater and they sort of fit in together, and I glue these on to the base of the sling before I actually start riveting. Now, as I said, I glue my reinforcing strips on before I actually do any riveting. Now, the benefit of this, of course, not only does it make it a little bit stronger, but nothing moves when you start getting into the drilling. Now, it's just a universal sort of glue, one of these contact cements. You make sure it's a bit tacky before you put it on, but you apply it to both surfaces, and then you just put it all together. If you make a bit of a mistake, you can actually rip it off and do it again, and it sort of cures in about 24 hours. For the corner straps, top and bottom, I put a little reinforcing panel in, which I glue first, and you need to make sure that you've got your D-rings in place as you're gluing it all together. Okay, now this is where we get into the holes for the rivets. I don't use a hand punch, I'm lazy, but there are too many holes. I use an electric drill, and I make a template up. I do have PDFs of these templates, so if you'd like to get a copy of the templates, you can send me an email to twohands@bigpond.com and I'll send you off a PDF. But of course you might have your own design that you'd like for your rivets. This particular sling I was making, the guy wanted his name Kiwi Muzzer at the top, so I had to make a special template for him. The corner straps are 12mm rivet. That's because it's going through 3 thicknesses. The base of the sling, they're 10mm rivets because it's only going through 2 thicknesses. But as you can see, lots of rivets, possibly far too many, but it makes it very strong. But of course, it sort of adds a little bit to the look of the slings. Now to get the corner straps onto the base of the sling, I make these special little corners. I use the chisel to make them a little bit smarter. Now this actually is about 4 thicknesses of leather in the corner, which is quite thick, so I don't use a rivet for these. In the corners I use what is called a Chicago screw, a 12mm Chicago screw. I put a piece of reinforcing in the corner where the D-ring is going to sit. This just makes it a little bit stronger. There are 4 layers of leather in the corner. Also, it just sits better on the sling with that little block in place. I glue the top to the base of the sling first of all, and when that's dried, I turn the sling over, put the corner straps in place with the D-ring, and then glue the other side before drilling the holes for the Chicago screws. We're now drilling the holes for the Chicago screws. These are quite good. Years ago, when I started making slings, and I've made over 2 dozen, I used to use a little coach bolt, but they're a little bit rough on the fingers and you don't want to cut hands or anything. I came across these Chicago screws. One piece just screws into the other. I often use a little bit of Loctite to make sure they're secure. I don't know whether that's entirely necessary, but, well, that's what I do anyway. Now I use a lot of D-rings. In the corner of the slings, I use 60mm D-rings. Elsewhere, I use a 50mm D-ring. Also, the stirrups. Some people like stirrups. I think it's a good idea, and I like to line these with a little bit of lamb's wool, just to make them a little bit softer on the ankles. You never know who's going to be lying in your sling, do you? If you'd like copies of the templates that I have used, send me an email, twohands@bigpond.com. If you're going to make a sling frame, maybe later on I'll do a YouTube on making your own sling frame. Some people like to put bolts in the ceilings. Here are some diagrams of the best positions for the bolts depending on the height of your ceiling.